Dylan, thank you so much for being with us today on the Fluent English Pro podcast.
Thank you very much for inviting me, David. It's a pleasure to be here.
Dylan, I am really happy to have you. I am always happy to have teachers because, I usually have professionals on the show, but when you have a teacher that has a focus on working with adults or with professionals, we can dive deeper into learning processes and how you can make your English, in this case, better. I know you're a teacher. You work with adult learners. You work with teachers as well. So can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure. Well, I'm originally from the UK, near the London area. And like lots of people, I finished university. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but wanted to travel. So I did a TEFL course, which is a course which teaches you how to teach English to foreign learners. There are lots of different ones, but I took it, really enjoyed it. And nearly 30 years later, I'm still doing this job. I've done lots of different jobs related to the English language teaching industry since then. But now I find myself in Spain. I live in the south of Spain, and I work with adult professionals who want to improve their language for work-related purposes. I train teachers. I have a couple of courses. So I'm a bit of a jack of all trades, and still enjoying the job. I think it's a pleasure to work with some really interesting people, and I can just facilitate and encourage and help them develop their English language skills.
Awesome. Before we jump onto today's topic, Dylan, I wanted to tell you I appreciate all the content you put on your LinkedIn account because as an English teacher myself, it is so useful and it gives you so many new perspectives on things that I have been doing for over a decade now. So very interesting to have the opportunity to re-observe my practices as a teacher. So I really appreciate what you do there.
Absolutely. That's great. LinkedIn's a great place for, I think, professional development, informal professional development, and connecting with fellow professionals like yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally agree with that. Okay, but today we are not going to talk about teaching. We are going to talk about project management. You shared the other day an article about project management for English learners, and many of our listeners are either project managers or have to do project management tasks on a daily basis, and there is a specific jargon for that. So I think the first question is why. I think every professional should know about this because you are either a project manager or you have to interact with one because you're part of a project. Why is it important for an English learner to get to know all the jargon about project management?
Well, jargon's a really interesting concept, isn't it? We can look at it in a positive way or a less positive way. So jargon, as we all know, it's technical language related to a specific profession or a specific group of people. So as a teacher, as an English language teacher, we have our own jargon. And if I'm in a bar or a cafe chatting with colleagues, I would probably use lots of terms which listeners wouldn't understand. And so whenever you enter a professional context, and you're working with people from that context, it really does help if you can understand some of the more common jargon items. I mean, there are different levels of jargon, aren't there? So within a specific area of project management, there are probably terms that I certainly wouldn't know. But I think it's really important if you are, as you said, if you're working as a project manager or you're working as a member of a project team, then a lot of these jargon terms are concepts which will save you a lot of time. And they give you kind of an entry point into that community of practice. So people will think, this person's a professional. They understand what scope creep means, or they understand what a contingency plan is. So you're able to basically understand how professional people in that context talk. And that's why I think jargon, knowing the basics, the common jargon terms, is essential, really, if you're working in any company, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think even though you're not directly related to project management, it's important for you to learn the basics. Yes, you shouldn't have all the deep information on anything, but on everything, but at least know the basics, so you can interact with other departments and other team members.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think nowadays the modern working world is so flexible that you might be offered a project manager position, or you might work with a project manager. So you want to be able to seize that opportunity and hit the ground running. You don't want to get really confused because some of the jargon. So this will give you the confidence to at least seem professional in that new position.
Yeah, totally agree. All right, let's what we're gonna do today is explore some key terms or key expressions in project management. I'm gonna give Dylan a few of those terms, and then he's gonna tell us what they mean and how they can apply in a real life work scenario. The first one is a term I have been usually faced with, which is scope creep. We don't like it. I run an agency. I run an audio production agency, Dylan, and it happens so often. Oh gosh, but it happens. It is a common thing. Scope creep. Can you tell us a little bit about what scope creep means?
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, of course, as an English language teacher, I will explain it in an English language teacher's way as well. So I hope that's useful for the listeners. But when we think of scope, we're thinking of the limits of a project. A project. So what's included in this project and what's not included in the project. That's basically the scope. And creep, if we think of a burglar or a robber entering a house late at night while people are sleeping because they want to steal their jewelry, well, they're not going to make a loud noise. So creep is walking slowly and quietly. And that's the idea of scope creep, where you agree to do something for your client, and then maybe a few weeks into the project, the client says, "Oh, I'm really happy, but I wonder if you could just add this feature. It won't take you long." And so you think, well, I want to keep the client satisfied. So you say, no problem. And then maybe a few weeks later, something similar happens and they say, "Oh, there's one more thing I'd like you to adjust." And so you say, okay, it won't take me long, a couple of days. But of course, that means that you have to move your milestones further forward, and maybe you won't meet your deadlines. Maybe the cost will expand. And this can happen without you noticing, really. So all these little things, these little extras that you are prepared to offer can have a significant impact on the project costs, the project timing, the amount of work you're expected to do. So that's the idea of scope creep. So it happens to all of us. Even in my English language teaching, it happens where a learner says they want me to help them with this, and then I start getting sort of WhatsApp messages saying, "Just one thing. This isn't included in the service, but would you mind just checking my email?" And so I think, well, okay, that's an extra 10 minutes work. Are you paying me for it? Maybe not. So that's scope creep.
Yeah, I think it's tricky, and this is part of a different conversation to keep a balance between like going the extra mile, which is sometimes good because it strengthens the relationship with the client, and like scope creep. Like you need to know where to draw the line.
Absolutely.
Um, yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
Good. Let's say, okay, let's try to picture a real life scenario for this. Let's say I am doing website design for
Mm,
you, Dylan. Um, okay, you're doing website design for me. Yeah, I
mhm.
am your client, and I task you with creating a website. So, what could be an example of scope creep in this type of scenario in general terms?
Yeah, well, it might be that you say to me, "Dylan, I just want a very simple website, a one-page website, just like a calling card for my business. So a photo, talking a little bit about what I do, and maybe a contact form." And then a few weeks later, you say to me, "Oh, actually, I'd like to add a blog. So would you mind just adding that as an extra?" So this would be an example. And I might think, well, okay, this might take me an hour to set up a blog page. Is that going to be included in the price? Maybe I will do it for you because I like you as a client, um, and I want to keep you satisfied. Maybe you could become a repeat client. But that would be an example of scope creep, I think,
Hmm.
if you're a
Yeah,
website developer.
yeah. If you expand and expand, yeah, it applies to every type of project, every type of client, whether you work in construction, education, health, well-being, etc. So, like,
Absolutely.
yeah, you have to observe your own context and determine whether it is happening or not. Good. All right. So that was scope creep. The other one is the other term we are going to talk about today is resource allocation. Resource allocation, very important for budgeting and execution. So tell us a little bit of what resource allocation means.
Absolutely. So whenever you work on a project, you have resources, which basically you have the budget, the finance, the money. You have the time, that's a resource. You have the people working in the team members, their knowledge, their skills, their experience, and so on. You have the equipment that is available to you. Um, and then there are a few other things as well, like the location in which you can actually work on the project. And one way to look at resource allocation, it's probably easiest with the money. So let's say we have $10,000 or 10,000 euros to start up a small business. Okay. And so we might say, okay, we can allocate $2,000 to marketing. Maybe we can allocate $3,000 to designing the product or the service. And that would be allocating, distributing, deciding how to spend the money that you have within your budget. But of course, it also refers to the people in your team, to allocate tasks, allocate roles to those people, and so on. So that's
Mhm.
obviously something that the project manager has to really think about and to keep control of, because obviously these things will change as the project evolves. Things cost more than you expected. People get sick, so maybe people have to actually cover for them, and so on.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. That is a great segue onto our next term. So we covered resource allocation is how you place the people you have, the tasks you have, the money you have, the tools, machinery you have. But if something doesn't go as planned, then comes the contingency plan.
Mm.
People will be surprised how many companies, how many teams do not have contingency plans. This is more common than you will imagine. But in an ideal scenario, if our team or our company had a contingency plan, how would you define this term?
Right. It's a very, very common term, but often the term is replaced by maybe more familiar terms like a plan B or a
Mhm.
backup plan. So whenever we start a project, we have to think, if my if the work doesn't go as planned, what will I do? So if, for example, um, let's say I want to release this project or this product at the end of the month, and then there's a delay with the supplies that I need to create the product, what do I do? Do I extend the deadline? Do I have another supplier who can actually give me what I need, and then I can still meet the launch date? So that's
Mhm.
what I think life's all about. I think John Lennon, the famous singer of the Beatles, said, "Life is what happens when you're busy making plans." And so we always need to have a plan B. As a teacher, as a trainer, I often have to have a plan B, because I decide to do something with a learner and they say, Dylan, I know we'd planned to work on my presentation, but I've got an interview tomorrow and I want to prepare for the interview. Can you do that? So I've got to have something ready in case that happens.
Yeah, yeah. As teachers, for example, we always have additional material in case, for example, the students finish earlier, or in case you need to shift focus because they already have like mastery of the topic. And I think in
Exactly.
similar cases, you can execute on that on I don't know design. Maybe you need to have additional assets, additional photographies, additional video,
Exactly.
additional software for that.
Exactly. Exactly. And it could just be something like the client doesn't actually like what you've created for them. And so,
Mhm.
well, okay, is there anything else I can produce or give them as an idea of what I can do to actually satisfy their specific needs?
Yeah, yeah. And there is also the aspect that, like, sometimes a contingency plan doesn't have, like, sometimes it is prepared well in advance,
Mm,
and sometimes it's something you didn't prepare for because you had never experienced it before. So you have to create it on the go.
absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. And I guess that's where your experience comes in. As a
Hmm.
teacher, I often have to do that, and luckily, I can draw upon my my sort of toolbox. So I've got lots of ideas in my head, and I've also got lots of resources that I can just pull out and say, well, I know you're not happy with my plan A, but what about plan B? What about this contingency plan? Um, and I think you're right. A lot of companies, for whatever reason, a lot of people don't have a contingency plan. They don't have a backup plan. Maybe they fall in love with their original idea and assume the client will love it. And sometimes that's not the case.
Yeah, yeah. Or sometimes like just documenting processes for a contingency plan is so much work. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh gosh.
absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. All right. So we just covered contingency plan. And the next one is actually two terms,
Mm,
Dylan, because I think the first term is essential, and then we go. The second is stakeholder misalignment.
mm,
Yes, but I know like the stakeholder part of it is also very important. It's a word that is not so common
mm.
in when you're teaching like general English. It appears only when you're teaching business English. So let's cover first what stakeholder means, and then we go with stakeholder misalignment. So how will we define stakeholder in a business setting?
Well, let's say you are creating a project. So you've been hired to create this product for your client. So we have one of the stakeholders, the client. So someone who's involved in the project. So it's the client, the customer. It's also the person who's producing or creating the product or the service. But also maybe they have investors backing them. So they would also be stakeholders. So anyone basically who is affected or who's involved in the project would be a stakeholder. And it also includes all the different departments in the company. It could even include if you're, for example, if you're taking out a loan from a bank, then they might also be considered stakeholders because they want to make sure that you're able to repay that loan.
Hmm. So it's all the people interested in what's going on in the process and who is going to be affected by whatever happens with the process.
Exactly. So that's why at the
Mhm.
beginning of a project, you really have to identify all of the stakeholders and kind of analyze their needs and their expectations.
Mhm.
Um, Misalignment, if something aligned, it fits well. So two things fit well together. If they misalign, they don't fit well together. And so this would be when, for example, one stakeholder has an expectation and another stakeholder has a different expectation. The two expectations are in conflict with each other. So it could be something like, let's say you have a product and the main investor wants to launch that product in the US market. But your marketing team think, no, it's too difficult to break into that market. We have to focus on the European market. This would be an example of stakeholder misalignment. There's
Mhm.
a
Yeah.
conflict of interest there, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. It's like when the interests or objectives diverge between
Exactly.
different stakeholders. Yes. That
Absolutely.
happens very often. Now that you bring it up, it often happens with social media marketing.
Right.
Gosh, because like the social media expert is going to tell you, hey, this is a strategy we're going to develop through the next 6 months, and then the client is like, I know, I want to go viral tomorrow. So like that's like there's no formula for going viral. Like we need to find a balance, and like they have an agreement. Like, okay, we need each other's we need each other's participation in this project. Yes, my services and your money, for example, or your contract, but their outcome I can offer is different from your expectation.
Absolutely. In fact, that happened to me recently where I had a client or potential client contact me for professional English language training. And we spoke in Spanish, and she said she had no English, but she was really motivated. And she said she wanted to reach C1 level, which is an advanced level, in 2 months.
Oh gosh.
And I said, honestly, you do realize that's highly unlikely. Maybe there are some people who could do that, but I don't know who they are. And she said, no, but I can do it, and I will work 12 hours a day on improving my English. You can teach me for 12 hours a day. And I had to tell her, that won't work either. You do realize that your brain will just collapse after about 3 hours of speaking another language, probably lesser time, actually. and there was a misalignment, and I couldn't unfortunately convince her that I couldn't get her from a complete beginner to advanced in 2 or 3 months.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, it happens more often than not, and I think
Yeah,
it's just a communication thing.
yeah.
Yeah, being clear about expectations and scope. Good. This is a good connection to my next term, which is communication breakdown. By the way,
Mm.
communication breakdown is a great Led Zeppelin song. I hope you're familiar with it, Dylan.
Absolutely, yes, yes. My brother was in a heavy metal band, so yeah.
Oh gosh, so you totally know what I'm talking about. But yeah, we are not talking about Led Zeppelin here, even though you should, like, everybody in the audience should go check that song. But we are speaking in the context of like business and project management, a communication breakdown. What does this mean in a work setting or business setting?
Right. Well, even when we're speaking the same language, even when we're from the same culture, maybe there'll be communication breakdown. I say something and maybe you don't interpret it. You don't interpret the message in the way that I intended. Okay. Now, obviously, nowadays, many people work in international teams. So you might have, let's say, someone from the United States or a British person, and they're trying to express something in their way to someone working in another country, and English is their second language or their third language. And so this might result in communication breakdown, where the person with the lower level of English doesn't understand what a native speaker, for example, is saying. And as a native speaker, I can guarantee that we are often the people who cause communication breakdown. Um, we use language which is very specific. But going back to jargon, also, communication breakdown is often caused by jargon. Someone will use a technical term and the client or someone else won't understand that. So, this would be an example of communication breakdown. And then something happens that causes maybe the project to stop, or it causes a huge problem in the project. Just recently, I had an example actually, and this was between a British person and an American person. It was a small thing, but they arranged to meet. They arranged a meeting time in an email, and so the American person says, "Let's meet on 10th of the 8th, 2025." Now, as a British person, I would understand that's the 10th of August, the 8th month in 2025. But an American, United States speaker, it would be the opposite, wouldn't it? It would be the 10th month, October, and the 8th day. And that was an example of communication breakdown. And again, it happens a lot.
Hey there, if you're enjoying the podcast, imagine how much more progress you could make with consistent, specialized support every week. Introducing the Fluent English Pro membership, designed specifically for busy professionals like you who want to keep improving their English even on a busy schedule. You'll find fluency activities, tutorials, mini courses, vocabulary builders, and live events, all focused on work and business English. Whether it's mastering international meetings, doing presentations, or answering tricky emails, this space is built to help you grow. If you're serious about your communication skills, visit fluentenglishpro.com/members and subscribe today. That is fluentenglishpro.com/members. Let's turn your English into your biggest professional asset. Yeah, it happens a lot to me. You know why? With what? Adela? With time zones, because I work with clients who
Yeah.
are in the States. So you have the East Coast, they have the West Coast, and then people who are in Europe. So, like, okay, what's your time
Yeah.
zone? And sometimes we book the call and then we connect to the call at different times because we didn't have clarity on what time zone we had agreed
Yes.
originally. But luckily, I think it's something, and like, you have to be open minded about and
Mm.
be aware, particularly in remote teams, that you have to, like, it's going to happen and you have to sometimes over communicate and you have to be able to adapt whenever it happens.
Exactly. That's really interesting what you said about over communicating. Yes, kind of repeating the message, asking for
Hmm.
or checking for clarification and
Hmm.
checking for understanding. Yeah.
Hmm. Great, great, great. All right, let's move on to our next term, which is, I think, what I experienced with my roof repairs this week, which is budget overruns. Budget overruns.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
does this mean, Dylan?
Well, first of all, it's often expressed in a slightly different way. You run over budget.
Uh huh.
So budget overrun would be the noun form, but also as a verb, to run over budget is
Run
another way
over
of expressing
budget.
it. Yeah.
Okay, great.
So let's say, using your example, you have $2,000. That seems quite cheap to fix a roof nowadays. But let's say $2,000 to fix your roof, and the builder says, "Yeah, no problem. I can do it for 2,000. It will take 2 days." Okay. And at the end of the second day, they say to you, I didn't realize there was a problem with this part of the roof. It's rotten. So we'll have to fix that. And so that will require an extra 3 hours of work. And of course, if they're doing extra work, they'll ask for a bit more money. So they ask you for $300 more. This would be an example of budget overrun. So it's always very difficult to predict the exact costs of something at the beginning of a project. For hundreds of reasons, just because it's a very, very, very complex operation. All projects are complex because they involve people, they involve different departments, lots and lots of different tasks, and things won't go as planned, unfortunately. They may take shorter or longer than expected, and they may cost more or less.
Yeah. Yeah. In my case, we went over budget because they calculated for an amount of like waterproofing material,
Ah,
but then they found out like we needed like a third more of that material. So we had just had to get the money, go get it, and they installed it afterwards. So like, yeah,
yeah.
it did go a bit over budget. Not that much, but yeah, it
No, but
happened.
I read something recently about civil engineering projects around the world. Bridges, train stations, airports, parks, whatever. And apparently, like something like 80% of them go over budget, and they go over budget by like 25 to 50%. So
Hmm.
it's amazing that people actually don't realize that when they're starting off paying for a project, because it will cost much more than you imagined.
It will. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always kind of keep that in mind. So I was mentally prepared, but luckily it was a small project, not a big
You have
one.
that contingency plan just in
I
case they, yeah.
I did have that contingency in mind for sure. Great. So let's move on to the next term, which is what happens after, or well, right before, I think, the
Mm,
project is delivered to the client, or just
mm,
after the contractor has finished doing their job, which is quality assurance. Quality
mm.
assurance. People sometimes have kind of a conflict with this because of does it assure? Like, what's the criteria? But I think it's essential for having a satisfied client. So tell us a little bit, Dylan, about what quality assurance means and how it applies in a real life scenario.
Yeah, well, you want to make sure that the person who does the project for you is able to produce a project of the expected quality. Okay. And you want to actually trust what they're going to produce. And so at the beginning, you want to feel confident that this project team can deliver what they say they can deliver. So that's all related to quality assurance. Um, of course, one way to do that, or one way to increase the possibility of quality assurance, is to have professional standards and professional diplomas and professional evidence that you're able to produce this quality that is expected of you. And for example, in my role as a teacher, this could be, okay, I have this certificate, I have this qualification, so that will give some indication that I'm able to deliver something that meets the quality you're expecting.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
Yeah.
quality assurance. Obviously, there are lots of different ways to assure or reassure the customer that you are able to provide that level of quality that they expect. And
Mm-hmm.
often it's a personal, isn't it? You need to meet that person, talk to them, and then you'll have some sort of intuition about their ability to provide the service or product that
Mm-hmm.
you're expecting.
Yeah, just to give another example, in my case, I have a client who has a quality assurance person. So whenever we
Mm.
deliver the product to them, like they will just double check it, make sure everything is on point. If adjustments are needed, so they will send it back, and we will make changes and send it again.
Exactly. So that also then happens throughout the project lifespan.
Hmm.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
You'll have these checks in place.
yeah. We also use the acronym QA for quality assurance. That's
Mm,
also very common, right? QA,
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
QA for
Yeah.
quality assurance.
Yeah.
Great. So next term is connected. So let's say quality assurance was successful, like the results were positive, the product was approved. Then we have a term, like, it could be two terms. We can be client satisfaction or client dissatisfaction.
Mm.
Yeah. How could we define this term or terms?
Well, this is obviously something that's very, very difficult to control, isn't it? Client satisfaction, because when you start working with the client, you can say, these are the criteria that we can use to assess the quality of the product or service I'm going to provide you with. But people, they may be satisfied with everything that's agreed, but they may not be satisfied with something else. So, for example, let's say you've agreed to design a software tool for a company. Okay, let's say a payment processing app or something. And so you and the client, you decide exactly what the client wants, and you say, okay, I'm able to deliver this. This is what I promised to deliver. And then you deliver it, and the client, the quality assurance is there. The client agrees that everything has been delivered, and yet they may not be happy. They may not be content. They may not be satisfied. Why? Well, maybe it delivers everything they wanted, but it's too complex to use. So it's not user friendly. And that wasn't agreed in the original agreement or contract. So this would be an example of when the client is dissatisfied, even though you actually created exactly what they expected. So this is something that can be very subjective, obviously. And again, it's all to do with expectations. And maybe the client has kind of the explicit expectations, which are down on paper, but then there are some implicit ones which they didn't maybe tell you. So this, again, it's a challenge when you're working in a project.
It is extremely variable. It also has to do with, for example, the client's personality, with like their
Yeah,
emotional state.
absolutely.
So like there is no one way to define where it starts and where it ends. Uh,
Yeah.
some clients will be happy with kind of anything you give them. Some
Yes.
clients will be unhappy no matter what you give them, and then you have everybody else in between.
Exactly, exactly. And I think in any profession, that's all you can do, really. You can just hope that there are more satisfied than dissatisfied clients.
I agree. I totally agree. All right. And now to wrap this up, we have the last term, Dylan, which is, I think, very important, risk assessment. And it's also kind of a combination of two key words that have their own meaning. And together they come to create a new, very important meaning when it comes to business and work. So tell us about risk, and then about assessment, and then how those two connected together create a new concept for business English.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, the risks are the negative things that can happen, or the dangerous things that can happen, or the harmful things that can happen in any situation. Um, and we can expand that concept as well. It's not only physical risk, but it could also be to risk to the reputation of the company. It could be legal risk, in which case you might have to pay a penalty. Um, Lots of different risks. So you have to identify the possible risks that might happen while you're delivering a project. And that requires you to, right at the beginning, before you've really started on the project, you have to think, okay, What could possibly go wrong here? Okay. And that's basically your risk assessment. And then you have to say, what's the likelihood? How likely is it that this could happen? And then you have to decide whether to take action or not. Preventative action in many cases. So I think we suggested the idea of like an online music a music festival. And this is a great example, actually. I'm from the UK, and just last weekend there was the biggest music festival in the UK called Glastonbury, and a couple of things happened which were mainly involved with some of the performers maybe saying things that they shouldn't have said in the concert, which was then televised broadcast. So at the moment in the British media and even in the UK Parliament, they're discussing whether to take legal action. So that's one risk in a music festival. You've got performers. Maybe the performers will do something that maybe is illegal, for example. That could be a risk. But also, if you're doing an outdoor music festival, there's the weather. What happens if it rains? What happens if it's too hot? So again, you might have to take precautions. You might have to make plans just in case it rains every day or the weather's too hot. There could be a failure with the equipment. So maybe the sound equipments don't work and you've got 100,000 people and they can't hear anything. What do? You need a contingency plan, which could be, other speakers, for example. Maybe the crowd get too excited and there's some violence in the crowd. All these things can happen. These are all possible risks. So you have to make plans just in case those things happen. Mm-hmm. Again, it comes back to this idea of contingency plans as well, I think.
Yeah.
You have to think. Yeah.
Yeah, I think those two are linked together, right?
Absolutely.
Your risk assessment and contingency planning. If you have one, you have to have the other. And I was thinking exactly about that. I don't know if it's still done. I think it is on live shows. What the broadcasting company or the television company does is that they actually broadcast with a 10 to 15 second delay. So in case something happens, they have like that 10 to 15 second window to either blur or block the image or just jump to like a commercial break.
Exactly.
So in case, I don't know, like somebody comes up and drops a bad word that is not like suitable for the time of the day, or something like an accident happens, or like there is nudity because I don't know, people are crazy sometimes at a festival. So like that's the risk assessment, and then the contingency plan is like that 10 to 15 second window between the live thing and the broadcast.
Exactly, that's a great example. Although, funnily enough, I was reading about that, and the BBC, which is the British Broadcasting Corporation, who broadcast this festival on television, they almost did it in real time because they were competing with YouTube, which streams things in real time. So they didn't want to have that 10, 15 second, I think it was reduced to something like 3 seconds. And they weren't quick enough to respond. So that's an example of a contingency plan which didn't quite work.
That's what you call cutting. Well, is that what would you call cutting corners?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
That's another expression, and then you have the consequences. Of
exactly.
bypassing.
Yeah, and I think cutting corners is specifically used with costs, like your builder you were talking about. Maybe if they use cheap materials. Yeah.
Great. Okay, very, very interesting story. So they have a contingency plan. They just bypassed it, or they changed it last minute.
I think so.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Good. Dylan, I think those are all of the terms we had for today for discussion. Mm-hmm. Those are going to be essential for everybody listening to this episode right now. You got to sit down and take note and listen to this episode at least 3-4 times, because there is a lot of terms here for you that you're going to actively use on a daily basis, for sure.
Let's hope so.
Dylan, I know you're a teacher as well. You work with adult learners. If people want to learn more about like how they can continue to improve their level of English, maybe if they need like a class or something like that, where can we find you? Where can we get in contact with you?
Well, I do have a website, but it's not complete yet, but it's available. It's out there. So that's dylangates.com. But Probably the best way to find me is on LinkedIn.
Mhm.
Again, just look for Dylan Gates, maybe add the word English or teacher, and I'm sure my name will come up. And that's probably the best place to find me. And I'm very happy to connect with people on LinkedIn. And yes, I've also got a couple of courses on the Udemy platform. That's
Mm.
Udemy. So you might find me on there as well. One, it's called Business English Idioms,
Oh.
and the other is called Master Polite English for professional purposes. So you might be interested in those courses as well.
Okay, okay. Dylan, let's do this. You gotta send me those links. For those people listening, the links to those two Udemy courses are going to be in the description of this episode for you. You go check them out. I
Great.
love the one about I gotta go check it out as well on business idioms. It's gonna be a great course. And all the links to Dylan's LinkedIn website and courses, of course, are going to be there in the description. Go check what he's posting on LinkedIn. A lot of value. I follow him myself. Actually, his LinkedIn content is why I invited him over to the podcast today. And Mister, thank you so much. Thank you for all the knowledge you have shared with us today.
You're very welcome. Really enjoyed it. We had a great conversation, and I hope people have taken a lot from this particular episode of your great podcast.
I'm sure they have. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Cheers, David.